Welcome everyone to the email extravaganza, sending election and holiday emails. I'm Jenny Lassie, the Director of Operations for HighRoad, and I still see some participants funneling in here, so I will get the ball rolling here in a minute. Okay, we'll get things started today. So for those of you who just joined us, this is the webinar for Email Extravaganza, sending election and holiday emails. And I'm Jenny Lassie, the Director of Operations for HighRoad, and I will be your speaker today. So yes, I've been doing deliverability for a multitude of platforms for many, many years. And so that's, but again, as a Director of Operations, my goal is operational efficiency. And part of that efficiency means that you kind of have to start from the ground level before we can get to the bigger things that faced association marketers today. So I will be answering any QA questions and looking at my Twitter feed throughout the webinar. So if you do happen to have a question, let's use the @HighRoad Jenny Twitter handle, and that way I can look at one feed. And if you wanted to use any of the applicable hashtags, you're more than welcome to do that. So today we're going to go through the Q4 forecast and inbox optimization, engagement optimization, and go over some resources. So drum roll, Q4 forecast. What is going to happen in Q4 that is so dramatically different than any other Q4 for association email marketers and association marketers in general that happen to be also tasked with sending out the email communications or other messages? Well, for starters, I don't do forecasting without some kind of data behind it, right? That's how I operate. I could, make rash accusations. I, invented the question mark, but really I look at data and what has happened in the past to predict future behavior. So what is different in Q4 2016? That really is not the case every Q4. We have the usual back to school email volume. We have the usual happy holidays, the increasing email volumes for retailers and marketers and associations that are sending out emails that are marketing maybe their events. That happened shortly after the first of the year. We also have increasing internet security protocols that are getting more restrictive as time goes on. It's never ever going to be less restrictive, just so you're aware. The US does have the most lenient compliance regulations when it comes down to sending email that any other country does not. And there's no legislation currently in place to make it more restrictive, but at that point, just knowing that it will never get less restrictive is important to note. And this is a huge election year. So the presidential election 2016, there are a lot of emails. I know my Gmail inbox is flooded with anything that I've ever been a part of, any petition I've ever signed, anything I've ever signed up for, I'm getting a lot more volume. And that means that ISPs have to do what they have to do to protect their customers against that flood of email volume. Okay, so taking a look here, we have Q1 2015 all the way to Q4 2015. So these are last year's email metric benchmarks that we did in a benchmark study for all of our association clients and what exactly they are seeing in terms of average metrics. So this is kind of a basis for comparison for what your association is doing. You might be doing slightly better than this. You might be doing slightly less than this, but regardless, this is an average across our association customers. So what I see here is a bunch of tables with some information in there, right? And what I see is that, you know, there's some fluctuations in terms of delivery rates, bounce rates, invalid rates, opt-out rates, click rates, and open rates. And so my prediction is that the open rates are going to be drastically different in Q4 than they are typically. We always see a little bit of a drop, right? When we see, you know, Q2 statistically, you know, has the higher open rate of any quarter in 2015, and it ever so slightly dips a little bit in Q3. That's usually the summer when association constituents are, you know, off on their summer vacations. The open rates decrease, you know, because you can imagine that they're out doing their summer stuff, summer vacations. There's just less people engaging with the emails, so that makes sense. And then the open rate kind of comes up a little bit for the Q4 in 2015 because people are back to work, right? They're back to school, they're back in their inboxes, they're back engaging with their associations that they're members of, and they're ready to go, right? So those are some typical fluctuations. But the previous election year, we also did a benchmark study and aggregated all the data from our association clients, and we do see some different trends, right? So overall open rates were a little down for across the board in an election year, Q1 through Q4. What I did notice the biggest discrepancy is that there is a much lower open rate, 27.26 in Q4. And when I'm looking at data, Q4 delivery non-election year, you see a tiny bit of fluctuation between delivery rate, bounce rates, invalid rates are a little bit higher from 2012. And opt-out rates, they pretty much stay, you know, there's not a huge margin of difference or discrepancy there, but the open rate is a pretty big discrepancy. All right, did I lose you? I always do this because whenever I'm speaking to a group of marketers at associations, the metrics part, it's not always the easiest to digest. It's not always the most fun thing about your job, right? Like the most fun is driving revenue, getting in front of your constituents, making them go somewhere, register for something so you can look like a rock star, right? And my whole goal is to make you look like a rock star. And sometimes it means just a little bit of minutia. So I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. So the differences to note are that delivery rates decreased marginally, bounce rates increased marginally. It's totally to be expected. Invalid rates increased, opt-outs, they stayed about the same, which is good. Click rates increased, so that's actually good, but the downside is that the open rates decreased. So the click rates are going to increase because, you know, of the people that are actually opening your email, they're going to be able to click through to it, right? So those metrics are a little bit elusive, but the open rates are decreasing, and that hurts, right? Because at a time when you're trying to reach people, you know, marketing your, you know, yearly conference, your annual conference, or whatever initiatives you may have, that's a decrease, a 7.64% decrease in the number of people that you're reaching, right? So that's important. Okay, why? Well, ISPs, frankly, they're just flooded with the higher email volumes, and their whole goal is to manage those email volumes hitting their customers. And ISPs tighten the inbox algorithms more in Q4 because of that volume. So it's logical, right? You get more, people get more restrictive to try and keep their customers happy. You know, their customers are, you know, hey, I'm getting way too many email, you know, spams coming into my inbox. So, you know, you have some filtering going into place. You also have some junk filter training on your side when people are seeing, or when ISPs are noticing that you're just deleting things before you actually look at them, but you're not really opting out. So they start to route those into your junk file. So that's important. Increasing security protocols for email server filters factor in if the sender uses authentication with the system sending email on behalf of their domain. That was a really long sentence, but basically what that means is that people are getting more restrictive. If you don't have the basics in place for even reaching an inbox, you just, it's not good, right? So what does this mean for you? It means that Q4 negatively impacts delivery rates a bit, but not bad. But Q4 primarily impacts engagement rates. So it's more, it's going to affect your open rates. So what has the biggest impact on your open rates? Drum roll, please. I don't really have a good drum roll sound or sound bite for that. But reaching the inbox. It's kind of a trick question, but it is so true. If you can't reach the inbox, people don't know that email is there to even engage with it or open it. So that is the biggest, that has the biggest impact on reaching that inbox. Okay, so now I deflated your, I deflated your balloon. So in that insert balloon deflating sound bites there. But what has the biggest impact on reaching an inbox? Authentication and reputation, right? It's the foundation of deliverability. So it's like before you spend all that time to get your best content and craft your best subject line, you have to do the basics, and it's not you as a association marketer doing the basics. It's really setting something up or initiating the setup of something first, right? So what is authentication? It's a digital signature, right? That's basically what it is. That gives permission of the system sending email on your behalf from your domain. So it's like I'm sending email from Jenny@HighRoadSolution.com, and I'm sending it out through this platform. You need to have authentication. Otherwise, the server-to-server interactions, they don't care, if who you are and what you did. They're looking at the authentication pieces first to even see if it's something that they would route. Spammers, they have a lack of authentication. So that's the big way servers differentiate legitimate email senders from the spam organizations. So the platform authentication configuration, basically there's 3 different things. And what any takeaway from this webinar that you get, just worry about right now SPF and DKIM. So I'm sure you've heard these terms before. If you haven't, Google it or look at some of the resources that I have in the last slide of this deck. But SPF is a text record. It's going to sender. It gives all that sender information of a record of the domain that has all the possible includes on it of systems that send email on your behalf, right? There's one record, and all it needs to be is updated to make sure it's including the system sending email on your behalf. The DKIM is really something that is set up between the platform and your domain, so there's a few extra text records to add there. And DMARC is another authentication tactic that you can set up. It's one text record, and it's going to give you a report of all different systems that send email on your behalf, and if that SPF and DKIM passed or failed or soft fail. It's a lot of mumbo jumbo, but if you do have it or if you don't have it, that is the question, right? So you as association marketers may not know if you have it or if you don't, right? Maybe you've already gone through the process and therefore yes, I remember going through this whole process. If you're newer to any, if you were a newer client or newer to the platform, you most likely went through this exercise when you were being onboarded. But anyone that has been sending on a platform for a while, right? At least greater than a year and a half, basically, if you've been sending through a platform for 4 years, 5 years, that wasn't best practice back then to have authentication, right? It's really this authentication technology started coming in really at a time when people are trying to find ways to cut down spam, right? So it's like you have more spam, you have more tactics to counterbalance that. So that's when authentication became important. So when I went through and did an authentication audit on all of our clients, 26% of associations have DKIM. That is troubling in Q4, right? Because right now it's more important than ever to have authentication, and only 26% do. So the whole purpose of this audit is to make sure that everyone has at least the basics going into November in place. So you'll have the least interruption in deliverability so you can reach an inbox. Only 41% of associations have a passing SPF record. Now that's good and bad. The bad part is only 50% of the associations that I looked this up for, only 50% of that 41 have a passing record that also includes the email platform sending email on their behalf. So that really means that only 21% of associations have a passing SPF record that gives permission from their domain to send on any platform that they're sending email from. A lot of room for improvement. This is great, but hey, sometimes identifying the issue is the hard part. It's the resolution and the fixing that takes 5 minutes that is going to net you some pretty big rewards in terms of your future open rates. So, and ISPs look at authentication first, blacklist second, and set up all authentication methods. Okay, so here's some config and what's important for some of the larger ISPs, and you could see across the board that DKIM and SPF are more highly weighted than anything else. Sender ID and domain keys are really older authentication technologies. As long as you have DKIM and SPF, you're in good shape. What about DMARC? So I've consulted with a few different clients in the past few months about DMARC, and really it's one text record. It's like one little thing that's added to your DNS that gives you a report. All emails that say they're coming from your domain, coming from you. It could be coming from your AMS notifications that go out to your members. It could be coming from maybe another prospecting platform that you're using, any like lead gen platform that you're using to send email on your behalf, and then your email platform that you send your normal newsletter communications to your constituents. All of those systems are sending email on your behalf. All of those systems should have the proper authentication methods in place. Now, does your Outlook need to have it? Your Outlook is a one-to-one. You might include more than one person on an email, but it's not really a one-to-many platform like an email platform is, right? You're not sending to a list of, you're not sending to a list in Outlook to 1,000 people, right? Like you might at maximum include your staff or something where it might be like 20 people. Anything more than 50, use an email platform. But that is, the DMARC is really the last step in the authentication process. It's so easy to put on, and it is so easy to look at those reports and really digest what it's telling you. And all it's going to tell you is if DKIM and SPF is passing, right? So if you get DKIM and SPF set up, the next step would be DMARC, but I would say, that's kind of a nice to have at this point. So I'm going to just demystify it a little bit because the term is scary for a lot of people. They don't understand what it means to have authentication, and it's just your domain. So you can have as many text records on your DKIM text records as you want. It does not interfere with your office email in any way, shape, or form. That's one of the biggest questions I get is, will this affect how we send email from, just from our Outlook? No, has nothing to do with it, completely separate. You should only have one SPF record in total. That includes all or as many platforms that send email on your behalf of your domain, right? And if your SPF record happens to fail due to too many DNS lookups, because maybe you have like 5 or 10 systems sending email on your behalf and your SPF record has too many DNS lookups, it will fail. So that's usually when you need to explore using a subdomain as your sender email. Okay, so just using ourselves as an example, we send email on behalf of HighRoad through many different platforms, right? Because we're platform agnostic. We have all of these different platforms that we use and we have our clients using. We have Acton, Adestra, Blue Hornet, HubSpot, Marketo. Doesn't matter if it's a marketing automation platform. It does not matter if it is an email platform whose primary role is email. You need to have the authentication set up. So if you have a domain versus a subdomain, it can vary. So for instance, all three of these, Blue Hornet, HubSpot, and Adestra, were kind of three platforms that we've been sending from since the beginning, right? And HighRoad Solution is our domain, and therefore we can use our marketing@highroadsolution.com email address just fine. That is not the case when you pull on many more platforms where you want to make sure that your SPF record is passing. The only way to make sure that is the case is that we couldn't add on any more items to our SPF record. So what we had to do is explore a subdomain. So instead of just highroadsolution.com, which is our domain, we had to create a subdomain of that, which usually looks like something in front of your domain dot and then your domain.com. So we created a subdomain for Acton, so acton.highroadsolution.com. So when we send emails from Acton, we use marketing@acton.highroadsolution.com. And that is because we want to make sure that anyone that's receiving an email from the system, they have these filters in place that are saying, hey, do you have authentication or don't you? And this is the way that we make sure that yes, we do. So we have the best chances of reaching an inbox. Okay, so this is me, and that's my soapbox. And now we can get to some of the fun stuff. But for association marketers, your best efforts to be an amazing marketer, to get in front of your constituents, to drive revenue, to write amazing content, to craft the best subject lines that impress yourself, right? All for nothing if you're sending without authentication, because you're doing all of this, you have this amazing outfit, right? But your body doesn't fill it. Okay, so you see the little kid here with the briefcase. The outfit might look amazing on a 6'2" gentleman. It does not look as good on a little kid because he doesn't fill it out. So just an example. It is important for marketers, and it's not necessarily important for marketers to implement it and make sure. Just know yes or no. Do you have it? Right? If you don't know the answer to that question, ask your account manager or whoever supports your email platforms. They'll tell you. Okay, so just some statistics about email reputation. So we have email reputation worldwide, 79% of commercial emails land in the inbox, right? So that's roughly 21% are reaching, they're not getting into they're going to the spam folder, they're going missing. So that's important in and of itself, because even if you have authentication, you still have hurdles, right? There's still hurdles to get to that inbox. It's like you're like in a dream where you're running through the field, but you have cement shoes on, right? It's exactly like that when you're trying to reach your constituents, because there's no way to force an email to go through to get to that inbox. The only way to do that is with, direct mail, is to send it and have it get somewhere. Otherwise, you don't pay for it, right? So the engagement filters look at ratio of active versus inactive accounts. So it's important to have those engagement metrics there. People are interacting, opening your emails, they're clicking through. The important thing in engagement filters is that they're not just receiving it and not opting out, but deleting it right away, right? Because that counts negatively in Q4 when ISPs are making their inbox algorithms more restrictive. Okay, so I recommend creating a default exclusion list that suppresses any non-openers or clickers beyond 180 days in Q4. Okay, email reputation. So know your return path sender score. If you don't know what that is, Google return path sender score, sign up for a free account, and it'll give you a score. It's between 0 and 100, and most of the time, any of the IP addresses that I monitor and return path, we see like a score of 98 or above. Anytime it dips below that, there's something wrong, right? And it's really true. So it's a good idea to just always keep that in mind, especially just prior to your heavy event marketing season, because you want those emails to get where they need to go, right? But if your reputation is low when you start to send them, it's not going to be a good fit, right? Segment versus batch and blast. And so, you know, when I even type the word batch, I start to tremble, I start to stutter, my eyes start to blink and twitch, because I really dislike that term. I don't like to use the word hate, but I dislike that term very much because it's how it was, right? It's not how it should be in the future. To batch and blast, you know, blast, it's you need to remove that from your terminology that you use. Yeah, we're going to send a blast tomorrow. Don't send a blast. You send a campaign and to a segmented audience. And that is how you can just shift your perspective to being like, you know, you might be a marketer, but an email marketer would just do that innately because that's what they do. They segment and then they send a campaign. They're not going to blast. So please don't use that term. But if you're going to use that term, at least, you know, blast it out to a segmented audience. And clean your list quarterly. Ask for permission, not forgiveness in email, or you will be blocked. And ask for permission and not forgiveness in Q3 and Q4, or you will have very, you know, deliverability problems in Q4. Okay, so I must blast my membership in Q4, this clueless, creepy email zombie guy or girl. And then your association constituent says, no, and they're running for cover, right? All these emails are trying to reach them at the same time. All right, so if authentication is set up and your sender score is great, now what? So let's deal with the now. Okay, let's put all that, let's pretend like if you don't have authentication, now it's set up. Now what do you do? And your reputation is great. Okay, so obviously we know that before you can reach an inbox, you have to have the authentication piece in place, you know, data security, email reputation, list hygiene, segmentation, and suppression. Now, you're through all those hurdles. Now what? Now look at all these more hurdles we have to go through. Wah, wah. You have sender email or sender name, subject line, offer. Think about like what's the first thing that people see when it's in their inbox, right? So it's finally in their inbox. It's the first thing people see is the sender name. Well, I think most associations have that in the bag, right? Because they're already a member of your association, right? And maybe this doesn't apply as much to prospect members and inactive members, but they're already engaging with you, and they came to you because they're getting value from your relationship. So your sender name shouldn't fluctuate too much, right? It should always be from your association. You know, kind of a no-brainer. Or maybe the association, you know, CEO, if that person has a lot of, I don't necessarily want to say clout, but a lot of recognition in your membership, then sender name is fine. Not a big time to be doing a ton of stuff with experimentation in Q4. Now subject line kind of goes down to the next level here. So subject line is the next thing. So people are like, okay, is it from somebody I want to read an email from? If not, delete, delete, delete. Okay, well, you got through one hurdle, the sender name, they recognize you. Now they look at the subject line. Is that some content that I might find interest in? Yes or no, right? And then they get to the offer and the content, right? And then they might get to like they'll see the call to action, which they should when they open it, but then they'll also see the intro paragraph and the expected links. Now that's kind of funny because, you know, I do still consult with a lot of associations that put the kitchen sink in an email when that should really be, and I say the kitchen sink, meaning a lot of content, right? And the whole purpose of email is not to put the kitchen sink in an email. It's to basically get people to go somewhere to do something. Usually that's your website. But so list hygiene, from name, subject line, content curation, template, design, and rendering. That's what we're dealing with now. Now that you're through to the inbox. Okay. List hygiene and segmentation, the average invalid rate at the point of collection is 6.7. So that means somebody's mistyping, they're fat fingering, or they're doing it on purpose, right? Generally not a problem for associations because they're trying to become a member and they're going to give you their correct email address. But they can mistype things, right? So of the invalid email addresses analyzed, 50% were true invalids, 12% were role accounts, 29% were accept all. And what those statistics are from is an email validation report where we actually look at all of the invalid email addresses in a database. So it might be like invalids, meaning the system will no longer send email to this email address because it's already determined that the email address is bad or invalid or ineligible, right? The system isn't going to attempt delivery anymore. So when we analyze those, 50% were true invalids, meaning 50% of those people mistyped it, or, they somehow got into the database listed report, or somebody keyed it in wrong. So running your invalid email addresses through an email validation tool should be something you're doing every 3 months if you're not already. Okay. All right. If you haven't used a list in about 3 months, run it through an email validation tool. It will pay for itself almost immediately. It's pennies, couple pennies per email, and it's really a small number of invalid email addresses that you might have to deal with. So it's important to keep it clean, because it's like for the amount you'd spend to send that email address a message, it pays for itself to just scrub them out of your database if it's not a good email address. So it's keeping things efficient that helps. Segment your audience for best engagement, performance, but at the very least, suppress non-engaged. So again, create a default exclusion list. Can't stress that enough. And so this is a little infographic I created a while back to show the cycle of email in a year. So we have, and I broke this out into quarters, so you can understand that, okay, in Q4, we have the segment and suppression, right? So that's the time people are getting more restrictive with their inbox algorithms. You need to restrict that and get more segmented and suppress any non-engaged as you're going through the quarter. Otherwise, it kind of snowballs, right? Like if you go against this flow, the flow is indicated by the arrows. And if you go against the flow, there's always deliverability issues, always. I think one of the things that's missing the most from people's like cycles of what they're typically used to doing is the permission piece. In the summer, so Q3, it's like you're asking for permission. It's like any of those "Are you still there?" campaigns, right? It's any of the "Hey, we noticed you're not really there. You're there, but you're not there. Hello, can we still email you?" And these permission campaigns are important in Q3 because they do feed into segments and suppression, because you want to suppress anybody that hasn't engaged. So if you don't do the permission piece, sometimes that means constituents, if you start suppressing, then they're not getting emails for a long time, right? So that's why I created this whole infographic. It's based on years of experience of dealing with the most common issues that people face. And this is a resolution to it. And so then Q1, again, in 2017, you'll learn, use A/B split testing, you'll send email, you learn from the analytics, do what is effective and stop doing what isn't. Usually the best way to do that is A/B split testing. And then, as spring increases in Q2, then you start to engage and excite. And that is, there's a lot of different engagement tactics and campaigns that you can launch. And then again, in summer is permission, and then segment and suppression. So these are things that are ingrained in me, but hey, so all right, you guys did it. Woohoo! You looked fabulous while making it through the painful part. So give yourself a round of applause, because that was a lot of detail to go through, right? A lot of technical metrics, and for a lot of association marketers, that their eyes glaze over when I talk to them about this. But understand that I'm a mother. I do it because I love you. I do it because I want you to be successful, right? And so you look fabulous. This is my dog here, by the way, and she broke her leg. She's almost done with her cast, but so it looks painful, right? But that was the most comfortable position that she found for her cast, is over her head. I wish we could all be that flexible, right? Okay, so back to this. Sender name, subject line, offer, intra-paragraph, expected length. Okay, so the sender name, we've already discussed. I think you guys pretty much have that down. Don't experiment very much in Q4 with sender name, trying to get people to entice to open, because at this point you don't know what works and what doesn't work. If you are inclined to do that, you could test it using A/B split testing with a small subsection of your audience to make sure that, okay, oh, that failed. I don't want to roll that out to 80% of my list if that little experiment failed. But hey, failing is just succeeding in experiencing a result. It might not be the desired result, but you learn from those things, right? Okay, so sender name and sender email. Consistency is key. Don't use, it's not time for experimenting. The sender name should be something your subscribers are familiar with, and the sender email shouldn't be a do not reply. That is important because a lot of email marketers do, because they don't want to put a real inbox into their sender email, because they don't want to get any kind of auto responses, I'm on vacation responses, that kind of thing, back to somebody's real inbox, because it'll be flooded, right? So you send an email to 10,000 people and somebody's inbox gets flooded and they hate you forever. So you want to use a soft monitored inbox, but don't use a do not reply. This is like somebody giving you the hand back. Hey, if you're not inviting the conversation, if you don't want to engage in conversation with me, you don't value my opinion, then I'm just not going to really respond, right? So it's that initial perception of welcoming communication, right? And it's so simple. Do not reply at your domain could be a soft monitored inbox, just like we're listening at yourdomain.com or communications at yourdomain.com. It doesn't matter. Like, it's still an alias, meaning it might be an actual inbox that somebody checks once in a while to make sure that nobody's trying to unsubscribe old school style and put it in the subject line, right? And you also might want to know, okay, some of those auto replies are important. You don't want them filling up your own inbox, but to check it, once every week, to go through and say, hey, this email address, they're not at that organization anymore, and we're supposed to contact this person, right? That might be important for you to know. Okay. And the subject line, if inspired to be creative in Q4, A/B test with your audience to see what performs and learn from it. So subject line tone, is often what's tested. So if, is it playful? Is it serious? Is it mean? Is it nice? Is it trying to be, I don't know, is it trying to be too funny? Is it trying too hard? It's like all this interpretation. So it's this whole, you can create an awesome, newsletter that has the best content in it, but the subject line doesn't entice the open, then it's all for nothing, right? So the subject line is the next hurdle you have to get through. And well, then what do we do? How do we write the greatest subject line? Do we just use the first article that's in our newsletter and use that headline as our subject line? That may or may not work for you. Why don't you test it? So review previously deployed emails to see which have the highest open rates, right? So learn from what works. If it doesn't work, don't do it anymore, but learn from what works. And I think a lot of times just not enough analysis is going into finding out what does work, so they know. It's always an afterthought. The subject line is almost always an afterthought, and it shouldn't be, because it's so important to get that person to open your email. So dynamic personalization, and we'll explain that a little bit in the next slide. Measure twice, cut once. Sticking with what works most in Q4. So it's not a time, again, to experiment. If you're going to experiment, use A/B testing, but not a 50-50 split. Do 10%, 10%, and then send the winning version to 80% of your list. You don't want to do 50-50, because if 50% didn't work, then you're up a creek without a paddle. But Jenny, how do we stand out if we should play it safe? Well, that's a good question. Sometimes, you kind of have to be a little bit naughty and a little bit nice at the same time. But the subject line safe bets per HubSpot is question about, and then anything that's in brackets is really the dynamic piece of it for the personalization. So it could be, and you might need to know this when you're looking at your segmentation and your personas. Well, what is the goal for this type of association marketer? What are their interests? right? And so you have that data if you use any kind of, you know, marketing automation platform or any inbound marketing platform like HubSpot. A little bit, you know, it takes a little bit more legwork to do it with an email marketing platform, totally possible, but it usually means that there's fields of data that exist in your AMS that you need to exist in your email platform. That might be a manual import. It might be, if you're integrated, it might be adding some fields to your integration, et cetera. So, so mutual connection recommended I get in touch. Our next steps, you know, this one's kind of funny. Do not open this email. I don't recommend using that one, but you know, you know what? Heck, it would entice me to open it. And that maybe that's just not because I have, you know, kids and they try to do that kind of naughty stuff all the time. But whenever you tell someone to not do something, the whole reverse psychology thing works on me. I get it. But I would open it. But X options to get started that people love, like the, you know, the number, and the solution, kind of, okay, here's some solutions. I need to know what those 7 steps are to get what I need done, right? And the name, obviously. The name is the most common personalization in the subject line, but it really, there can be personalization failures if your data isn't sound and if you don't have a first name value for everyone that you're sending the email to. So that can be some tricky stuff. I love personalization when it works, but when it doesn't work, it's always a flippity flop. So know this topic, you know about this topic, and then have like a topic of interest. So if you collect interests of your constituents because you have, you know, you send targeted communications that have those interests in place, like our ICE applications will go pull from the AMS and say, hey, they like advocacy, they like legislation. We're going to pull all that content from their website and put it in email and send it out. You already know those topics of interest, but if you don't, maybe you can use some of the data that you do have and make some assumptions. A benefit of prospect company. These are just some ideas to really resonate with your constituents, and they're you know, they're safe bets per HubSpot. So they aggregated a lot of different subject lines and to determine which made the list. Okay, so also there's some subject line creativity you can do. And so I know this is kind of old school, right? But I'm sure you've seen the emails that use emoji-like characters in the subject line. There is a right way to do this, and there is a wrong way to do that. So a wrong way would be to assume that just because an emoji is displayed for you when you see it, doesn't mean it's going to render correctly of when the recipient receives the email, unless you do it in a very, very specific way, right? And to, you know, oh, I want to put you know, like a happy emoji of a martini glass with that stirring or something. I don't know. You want to get creative. But there's definitely a better way to do it to make sure that the subject line displays it for everyone across the board, no matter who's receiving it. And the only way to do that is to make sure that you're using a base 64 UTF-8 encoded string. Okay, so here's some step-by-step. We also have a blog post on this on our blog about using emoji-like characters and I say emoji-like because they're not truly emojis, like they're not, you know, emoticons or other characters that you might, you know, use when you're responding to someone's Facebook post, right? But it's the characters that look, you know, they have a lot of different options, right? And here's the way to do it. So if you have any questions about this and how to do it, you know what, I heard this on the webinar about how to do this. I want to learn how to do this. You can just search, you know, Google or go onto the HighRoad blog and look for the emoji-like characters, and it has a step-by-step on that, on how to do this. And then it looks really technical, but this is step-by-step. You go here, you put in your subject line that you had in your character map, and you copy the string of characters the tool gives you. You just copy paste, and the output is what you put in your subject line. It looks weird, but when you send a test email to yourself, it encodes it, or I should say decodes it, and puts in the correct characters. So this made this. okay? So it's really not that difficult. It's just as long as you know the step-by-step, you're in good shape. Okay, so the content curation. So, you know, you've already gotten through the sender email and you've already gotten through the subject line and you've enticed your constituent to open your message. And now what? You know, the content is there. And how does the content look? That is the, you know, because sometimes if it's really long, people are like, oh, I don't have time for this. Okay, that's what you don't want. You don't want someone to say, you know, hey, I'm busy. I value my time. I want you to value my time. Give me the baby, not the labor, on how, you know, and then tell me where to go and get the labor if I so choose to want to feel that labor. Okay, and I say labor, I don't mean to oversimplify the content, but it's just give me the gist, give me the synopsis, give me something that drives me to learn more or read more somewhere else. Don't put it all in the email again. No kitchen sinks in email, people. No kitchen sinks. So the content, curate the content that's unlikely to contribute to a complaint. Sometimes by the nature of certain types of communications you send, like complaints just come hand in hand with it, right? Like if they don't agree with your viewpoint, or, you know, if there's some legislation that maybe doesn't resonate with them, that your association is behind, I get it. There can be some complaints, but to minimize it would be the goal. So obviously the content needs to be relevant to the recipient or written to speak to the persona or demographic or segmentation of the recipient. So this is when you can get really creative with dynamic content to speak in the persona. Like you can't speak to a millennial like you can Gen Xer, right? Their minds work differently. They have completely different, everything that they were raised with and grew up with and learned from doing is a completely different process than how another generation learns. So you need to speak with a different tone, a different, you know, type of wording, and explain things differently, and use different communication channels, because you know, some may respond more on social media than in an email, right? So again, curate content. But again, a lot of times email drives people to go do something on Facebook, right? It's just really the vehicle that gets in front of them to get them to go somewhere and do something. And curate the content that speaks to the persona directly, or where they are in their journey with your organization. So, and what I say by that is, what I mean by that, when I say by that, is though, if there's something specific you want to interject into your normal communications, like maybe your membership is about to renew message, just something small, but something that you want to make sure if they meet a certain criteria, their membership is about to renew, or maybe they just renewed and it's a thank you message or something relevant that sneaks in there with all their other content. That's a value add. Then they understand that you really get them. Okay. And the role of email is to, you know, I keep saying this over and over again, is to direct a recipient somewhere to do something. So using teaser text and read more links. Don't give away the kitchen sink or the there's not just the reason that it's too much and they don't want to read it. The actual HTML file size of that HTML file that you're sending to them could reach a threshold that nets you more bounces, right? I've seen it before. I've done A/B tests with some associations where they were like, gosh, you know, we changed our structure to our newsletter, and now everyone's reporting that it's going into their spam folder. What's going on? So it's just like everything, all the factors that were in place before were factors before and after. What's the difference between these two templates? And the other one was the file size was much larger because the way the HTML is structured, but also they had way more images, which is, there has to be balance, right? There has to be balance. You can't have too many images and not enough text. If you're going to have a lot of images, you know, they can't be ginormous, because first of all, people have images suppressed by default, which most Outlook people that are using Outlook do. They're not seeing the images. So, and then also relevancy, that the content needs to be relevant for the person receiving it. Okay. So template rendering, design and rendering. So there's a lot of really, really cool stuff that's coming around. Now, Outlook does keep holding everybody back in terms of what you can, like the cool stuff people want to do, right? Like video and email and, you know, accordion menus and different menus in email and executable like polls in email, like making email like a little mini web page, right? That interacts the same way with the database that a web page would. Outlook is holding everybody back, and that will be the case for a while longer. You know, they're slow to make changes, but everyone else is like, woo-hoo-hoo. So you kind of have to understand what your constituents are using, right? So you can know how creative you need to get. But anyway, I'm going to start with the first bullet point here, because this is something that I just learned, that as of September 2016, and of course I did confirm this is the case. So when I consulted with our a lot of associations where they're like, well, where are these opt-outs coming from? Like, these people aren't going to our preference center. They're not going to, you know, they didn't get anywhere else by mistake to get removed. They didn't call membership services and ask to be removed or whatever. How are they getting on our global suppression list? And so, you know, obviously there are feedback loops in place with these different platforms and the ISPs. So if I'm a Gmail customer, which I am, and I don't want this email anymore, Gmail does put its own unsubscribe link on there. Okay, they have for a while. It's been there for at least like 3 years, and Yahoo and Microsoft do. So any Hotmail, Live, MSN, email, they have their own unsubscribe, and you know, a lot of times people don't know the difference. Your constituents do not know the difference between your unsubscribe and their unsubscribe, so they might not know which one to click. And it's up to you to make your email layouts very easy for them to see the difference between the two, right? But as of September, iOS devices joined Gmail, Yahoo, and Microsoft for adding their own list unsubscribe. And that's important because if more and more of your constituents are consuming the email on mobile, iOS still has market share, and they could foreseeably get on your global suppression list without you even knowing it, right? And I know, you know, a lot of associations have bylaws. Hey, you can't opt out of certain communications because, you know, we're required to send these to you because of your membership with us and stuff. And you know, bottom line is you can't make anyone get an email from you. You can try as hard as possible, but you know, still people have that complaint button that in that list unsubscribe. So it's just good to come to that realization and try to do what you can to minimize the chances that somebody could possibly get on your global suppression list or opt-out list. Okay, and then always use responsive HTML. I still see some templates that aren't responsive, and it is so important. Absolutely, 100%. If you get your email and it does not flex down or flex the layout based on the size of your screen, you need to change that now. There's some free templates available in Litmus. They have had good and, you know, some mediocre results for some, you know, some of them are not like the layout that you would want or whatever. So most of the time it makes sense to kind of take that and customize it for your liking. But, you know, if you are in need of templates, I would highly suggest doing that as a Q4 initiative so you can kind of start the ground running or hit the ground running in January and know what performs the best for your audience. Okay, so here's just an example of what this looks like. So this is an email that I received. So if you can see here right at the very top, just below my inbox number, if you can see 45,245 email. Yes, I have that many in my Gmail. I stopped trying to keep up a long time ago. And unsubscribe. So this message is from a mailing list and it has an unsubscribe. So if I were to click that top link, completely going and bypassing Shutterfly's own unsubscribe mechanism from the email platform they're sending email from, I'm done. Like, I don't get another email from them. This function will remove me to the global suppression list, and I won't get another email from them unless it's transactional, because transactional emails do bypass global suppression lists if that is programmed to do that. So, Okay, so here's some, template design rendering in 2017. We're getting to the point now where if you have a lot of your constituents are opening their email in mobile, start getting creative, right? Like, so you have the desktop experience, right? But if you have more people using tablets and iOS devices, and you can start to get more creative, right? And you can send different versions of your email. So generally speaking, if you do some of these design tactics, like this is one of like a menu system. So it'll have like the little pluses, and if you were to hit those little pluses, it expands the layout. So it's actually dynamically changing the layout based on your interaction with the email in the email itself. So that's pretty cool. There's some other things like accordion menus, scratch and flip, pretty cool for retailers if you want to do some kind of promotion that can consume the email and use a scratch effect, like they can scratch it on their actual device and then it'll scratch off an offer. So that's pretty cool. I haven't seen it done very much. So if anyone's interested in doing any kind of promotion like that, would definitely be interested in a case study using your example, if you would be so inclined. We'll give you a break on the price of that template in order to do that. But the graphs, interactive graphs, very important too, right? So these interactive graphs work. Again, the Outlook is going to hold everyone back. So for Outlook, if you have like a graph that you want to display, it has to be either pulled in using dynamic content, or maybe, some of our ICE applications have some dynamic graphs in there, like, percentage of CPE credits they have left before their deadline or whatever. Rotating banners, animated GIFs. And still the true way to do video in email is to use an animated GIF. Outlook will just show one of the screens of that GIF, but it will, at least for everyone else, they'll see the animation. And then there's just some design rendering pitfalls to avoid harsh colors. And I think right now, Q4 is not like the time to make some big changes, because you really want to be consistent. But definitely in 2017, start to think about, do our current layouts, do they need some refreshing? If so, let's get the ball rolling and start some conversations about getting some templates designed and the number of templates, and then we can start to take these things into consideration and help you. All right, and so from a deliverability perspective, after the fact, so you've already reached the inbox, you've already enticed the constituent with content, and now what do you do after? So the after is just as important as the before. It's often the most overlooked and forgotten about, right? It's the closet in the basement you need to clean. But monitor your bounce logs within 48 hours of the deployment to address any delivery issues. And obviously, authentication should already be in place, but if it's not, then address that, because that might be the root of the bounce. Okay, invalids, spot check, run your invalids through an email validation tool to clean up your list. And opt-outs, include an unsubscribe link in the pre-header of your email. So if you use pre-header text in your templates, I highly recommend, if you do not, that you add it. That's just a tiny bit of text to the top before your email actually starts. Most people use that as an opportunity to say, please, to ensure future delivery, please add to your safe list, or maybe they have trouble viewing this email, view it online, that kind of thing. That pre-header area is important, that you could also try to get ahead of this new list unsubscribe in Gmail and Hotmail if you have a lot of constituents that use those ISPs, and move that link to manage your preferences in the header, right? Because what you want to do is you don't want somebody to try and search for yours, and yours is in the footer, and the ISP or the device or whatever displays the list unsubscribe prominently at the very, very top, tippy top, the first thing that they see in the email. You need to compete with that, and I do recommend moving that manage preferences link into the pre-header text. And then always honor the unsubscribe, obviously, when launching emails. So you can see here, there's an example of the unsubscribe link in Gmail, right? And it used to be that it would only insert it for like marketing type messages, right? So if I was using Gmail, and I'm in my promotions tab, which would bring in all of the promotional email that I get, and it would, most of the time, we'll have that unsubscribe. Anything in my primary tab, or sometimes the social tab, won't necessarily have that in there, but it, you know, in more and more cases, it is becoming the norm that it's there. So, like I said, pre-header text above. This particular email does not have pre-header text, which is naughty, CrowdCut. Okay. And then this is where the arrow is the spam report button. So you can see that this spam report button is right next to the delete button. I just want to point that out because if somebody isn't liking something, it's so easy to report it as spam than to just delete it. So that's important. Again, if they had an unsubscribe, you know, this is the list unsubscribe for Gmail, but if they had like something in the pre-header, it's just giving them an extra option before they're enticed to click that naughty button. Okay, and reporting metrics, poop in, poop out. So whew, we're at the top of the hour. I said poop, and now I have your attention. But metrics are a direct result of the sum of all parts that we've discussed. So if you don't like the outcome, you must address everything and not point the finger at one thing, because you don't know what's responsible for the outcome. So thank you for participating in Email Extravaganza, sending election and holiday emails webinar. I may have missed a bunch of stuff that you came to this webinar hoping to find out. So let's continue the conversation on Twitter. You can tweet me using @HighRoadJenny and any of the applicable hashtags. And thank you very much for joining us today.